Okay, we will be, I don't know if we want to call it totally switching gears, but as you can see, we've got bacteria now, which is chapter 23. Then we'll move on to 24 a little later on, probably in a little over a week. It's just a guess. Okay, that's just a guess from a different periodical, I believed, or I thought it was 17, but it's actually chapter 23. I know it says 17, but it should say 23. All right. So, moving on from that, okay, some of you, and I don't know, society has changed so much from the time that your grandparents were growing up, and then your parents being probably about the same age as with myself and that generation, and now we've got yourselves. And I don't know, I would think that with your grandparents, when they were your age, it was just socially accepted that at that time they possibly believed that by the time they reached the age of 22, 23, and it's not true for everyone back then, it's not true for everyone today either, but it might have been just socially acceptable. It was move on and get a job, settle down, and get married, and possibly start a family. So maybe it was true back then, maybe it wasn't, maybe that's true today, maybe it's not, okay? So one of the reasons I bring that up with today's society, maybe some of you have that in mind, that, okay, we're 16 years old now, and 10 years from now, this is where I maybe picture myself, okay? So with that, some of you maybe picture your job, you're settled down, and some of you maybe do want to start a family. And I think some people do know that when they are your age, okay? So if, just for argument's sake, that's the road we're going to go down, that you're going to be between 26 and 30, just using that as an example, that maybe you're going to start a family. So with that, with the cost of raising kids, okay, how many of you know right now, yeah, are we done? What are we doing back there? So, how many of you, if you were babysitting some of your nieces or nephews, or maybe, I wouldn't say your younger brothers or sisters because they're probably older than that, but how many of you would know whether you need to take, and I'm not sure, I know the answer. How many of you know you need to take your niece or nephew to the doctor because they're not feeling well? He said, I'm not saying I would know the answer either, but are you always going to get clear-cut results when you go to the doctor if it is a bacterial infection like bronchitis? Yes, you would. Okay? Should you be running a fever and possibly, I'm not saying having chest pains and your body aches and you feel cold, what would you interpret that's probably symptoms of what instead? Okay, so the flu, possibly influenza A, B, whichever. So with that, how are the symptoms going to be treated differently from having body chills and the flu to coughing up mucus and having a bacteria? What's the difference between the two besides saying, well, one's a virus, one's a bacteria? What's the treatment going to be different between those two? Do you think? Your body can handle both of them. Okay? A vaccine's just going to help you treat the symptoms. That's true. But what can the doctor physically treat for you? Just because they give you a vaccine, you're already probably a month behind. They can treat the cough. Yes, they can. Why is that? You can treat bacteria. Can you treat viruses? No, no, you can't. And like you said, well, just get a vaccine. Well, that's true, but why is someone a month behind already? Because you have to be exposed to that virus to build up an immunity to it. And that's why you get a flu shot or the flu vaccine approximately, when would that have been? In October, maybe? Does that sound accurate? I don't know. I'm just trying to remember back when those flu shots were given. Okay? So, yes, that's true. You can treat bacteria a lot easier than you can treat viruses because they have to run their course. Viruses do. Okay? Then maybe some of the bigger questions. Okay? Should we be starting a family? Some of you ladies may have a daughter who grows up just like you. Okay? Or you have a son who brings home a daughter or brings home a girlfriend just like you. Guys, say the same thing for you. You may have a son who runs up just like you. Or you have a daughter that brings home a boyfriend just like you. Is that good or bad? So, do you want your son acting just like you? So, yes. No. Why not? Okay, so why not? You'd raise them better. So, what's wrong with how you're being raised to raising better your son? Your voice has changed. Said your voice has changed. Okay, yeah. That's what you're going to... Okay, yeah. All right. Anybody else weigh in on that? Just like you? Okay. Is that good? It must be good if you say that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's only you can answer. Okay? But other people can weigh in on that. Okay? And that's fine. It's opinion based. So one of the things, how many of you would like to go back to this 10 years from now and say, you remember that day, January 23rd, when I said, I want to have a daughter who's just like me. Or I want to have a son who's just like me. Women, what do you think? You want a daughter just like you? Okay? So, all right. So ask and answer. So that's some of the things I want you to think about. Okay? And I understand. It's 10 years down the road. But how many of you think you would be ready for that responsibility in 10 years? And maybe you don't know.
Yeah, boys, we got this. We can be some good dads.
Okay? All right. Okay. So what we want to do... All right. So when you picture bacteria, what's maybe the first thing that comes to your mind? First thing. Can be, but that's a different phylum or different kingdom. Germs would be one. That can be bacteria and viruses. We would say molds. That's fungi instead, which is a different idea. Okay, so what comes to mind? No, well, can be. So what comes to mind? Anyway, when we we look at that term, what's one of the first things comes to your mind when you think about bacteria? Can be infections. Now, are some of these pretty dangerous to us? I would say probably not. Okay. Unless, where, oddly enough, it's rather ironic, where are some of the worst bacteria to be found? No. No. Remember, you have to know what ironic means.
In your body.
No. It can be food. Okay, floor, yes. We're talking about surroundings. No. Something that's totally ironic. Come on, think about it, people.
Other people.
It's a location. It's not necessarily a room. Okay. Who said hospital? Okay. So why is that ironic to say some of the worst bacteria you can pick up is actually in the hospital? The reason that's ironic is you are there for treatment. So now you're getting an infection for something that you're trying to be treated for. Kind of ironic. Okay? But if that's the case, how did we get to that point, do you think? Superbugs or super bacteria. How did we get to that point? It's not so much that they mutated, but it used. Trying to help you out here, people. All right? Okay? So as we progress forward, okay, it used to be that the standard treatment for bacteria would be, let's give you a shot of penicillin. So is penicillin very effective now, do you think? Not really. Okay? Well, it can be, provided you haven't been exposed to a lot of bacteria. Because what used to be a little was good, maybe more is better, and no, that's not the case. Because you have to prescribe or use more and more antibiotics just to treat something very, very simple. What should have happened, and medical personnel did not know this years ago, is that just let your body fight that infection off. Okay? And a classic example of that is, okay, for anyone who's been working on the farm or outside, okay, so if you've been working outside, you're on the farm, you got to take your gloves off, and it's really cold outside. A lot of you have been there, okay? What happens to the tip of your fingers? Yeah, they start to sting, they start to hurt, but what's causing that? So let me get this straight. Some of the things you're saying, you want people growing up just like you. You did too. Well, many of your friends around you then. Is that, so that's what we want in, oh, okay. You can weigh on this too, ladies. We want more of these people?
No. Yeah, well, we don't want any more of them, so that's good.
I really don't think that helps your argument much. Who do you think is going to be more believable? Who do you think is going to be more believable? Who do you think is going to be more believable? Why do you think I keep asking that? Who do you think I would believe?
Obviously them.
Okay. Asked and answered. Okay. So, what happens with this? Okay. Now we're done, aren't we? Okay? So with this, when you come back inside, you got ice crystals in your fingertips. Okay? So what happens? Is this boring you people? Is this boring you? So then, what do we have to add to it? Yeah, I don't know either. So to make sense of this, remember we said doctors used to prescribe too much in antibiotics. That was the wrong practice. Just like the wrong practice used to be, are we done? Okay. So what used to be is that when hypothermia was treated, whether it's in your fingertips or if someone's really cold, what's happening to the rest of your extremities? What's your blood supply doing? Are you having lots of blood out in your extremities or very little? Very little, because all of the arteries sending blood out there are starting to constrict and not send that out to your extremities. Why would your body do that? Because you need to keep your core body temperature up. This is the most important part of your body right here, from your head down to your thorax. Okay? Are legs and arms important? Well, yes, of course they are. But it's kind of like your brain's way of saying, we're going to cut our losses. So what it does is it cuts the blood supply down there. And what treatment used to be is, let's put these people in a hot water bath. Well, what would happen is all of the extremities that had closed off arteries, they're going to expand really fast. Okay? So when that happens, what do you think your blood pressure is going to do? Is it going to go up or down? It's going to drop, and you're going to go into shock, and you can possibly die from that. So that's what happens, is we learn from those mistakes. So when it comes to these superbugs, we're paying the price in learning from them, some of them mistakes. Now, what was one of the random facts of the day that was over the intercom about bacteria? Only about 0.1% of bacteria are actually dangerous to humans. But the problem with that is there's so many bacteria out there, but it's not that all of them are dangerous to us. It's just a lot of it just depends on a lot of hygiene. Okay? So that doesn't mean, oh my God, it's horrible outside that we're going to die from bacteria. No, that's not our point of what we're getting at. But there are some bacteria out there that are bad for us, but not all of them. Okay, so as we move forward then, okay, so when we look at these two major domains of all bacteria, very simple organisms, just one cell only, okay? So when we see that, they're either going to have a nucleus or lack them. The eukaryotes would have them, these do not, okay? And there is one type of cell in our body. We consider ourselves not only just multicellular, but all the cells having a nucleus in all of our cells. But that's not the truth. But that's not the case. Blood cells, red blood cells, lack a nucleus. Why might that be? And I don't think you're going to know the answer to that. It's not a reflection of your intelligence. It's just you've never been taught that before. Because a red blood cell's major function is what? What's it carrying throughout the body? How many of you have donated blood? What do they got to test for right away? They take your finger, stick a little needle in it. No. They're testing to see what your iron levels are, because if you have low iron levels, that means you're kind of anemic. So you're not carrying much oxygen around. So your blood cell count is fairly low. Your red blood cells carry oxygen throughout the body. So if you have a nucleus inside of there, it's just taking up more space, that more vital space that needs to be filled with oxygen. Okay? Well, then you might be thinking, well, I thought all cells had a nucleus. Well, yeah, that's true, but what do you think the average length of a red blood cell is in days?
2 days.
I hope not.
Average what?
Average length of red blood cells, how long they last.
4 seconds.
I'd say maybe about 20 days or so. And you continually recycle those. Your spleen will filter them out of the blood, and you continually produce more red blood cells. Okay. So we see here, also aid many organisms such as humans. Yes, that's true. Cattle and insects. The major one we'd want to focus on is cattle. Okay? So what's a steer, heifer, cow, or cattle's main diet? Probably silage, grass, alfalfa, all of that. All of those have what in common? They're all plant-based. Plants are composed of starch and cellulose, especially cellulose. A long chain. That's really, really hard to digest. We have that problem too. What would happen if our diet was just celery? We would. Why would that be? It takes more energy to burn that, to digest than what you are taking in. So, when it comes to cattle, okay, as far as the stomach is concerned, why is the number 4 significant? That's how many chambers they've got. Because the first one, in that chamber, there's bacteria found in there. And what those bacteria do is make enzymes to break down that cellulose. Cattle can't do it on their own. So they have to have that type of bacteria in there to help break down that cellulose. Okay. Sugars. Yep. Also important, we've got decomposers to break down, like that deer that is on the side of the road on Highway 34. Although it's pretty cold now, so you got little coyotes or raccoons that would probably gnaw on it before it's picked up by rendering service. Otherwise, in the summertime, you'd have bacteria breaking that carcass down. So probably 3 weeks from now, or maybe last week of February, somewhere in that vicinity, these 2 types of bacteria we'll be looking at, and it's something that you will be evaluated on. So it's something like some people shoot free throws very well, some people don't. Some people are very good at this, some people, maybe with practice, they can get better at it. But it's something that we evaluate you on. The process, not the identification. Okay? Because what happens is if we're looking at a bacteria like this, it's gram-positive. This is what we call gram-negative. The reason something like that's important is because that's how you culture bacteria. How many of you have ever had to have a throat culture? Okay? So what they will do is swab the back of your throat. Okay? And what they're going to do is do a very simple lab test and see, is this gram-positive bacteria or gram-negative? So we do something very similar to that. And the reason we do that type of procedure is the gram stain. It's quick, it's cheap, and hospital costs or healthcare costs, that's something that you really don't see happening very often. It's cheap and healthcare usually don't belong in the same sentence, and reliable. Those 3 things is a good reason to continue to do those. It's quick, it's reliable, and it's fairly cheap to do. All right. So, let's see here. We can start with talking about that gram stain tomorrow. I want to get you going on what this deals with. Is it talks about immunity with bacteria and viruses. So now, keep in mind, this material is going to continually get more and more difficult, okay? Some of you were given the benefit of the doubt last semester. Some of you have burned your bridges from last year, maybe, okay? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. So, what I would do is probably try to come in here with a good attitude and get the work done so we can move forward. So that is hopefully going to be a good reflection on your attitudes. Okay? Unless